Hello everyone, here's a walkthrough of two of the homework problems, array concat and count clumps. Whoa, what's happened here? Alright, there we go. I wanted to show you how I would approach this homework if I were doing it. The first thing I've done is I've created a sort of a test class. Maybe you would call this like homework 2 or something. Most of my homework problems I request methods, so you would put your method signatures here. Method signature, remember, is the name and the parameters and the return type. Just with empty bodies. And if you want to eliminate the compile time errors, you can put in some just default return values, and then you can change them when you actually fill in the bodies. But then, more than just having the methods, inside main, I want to have at least a couple of test cases that I can run the methods on to make sure that they actually do what they're supposed to do. So here I've made 3 test arrays. And then here I'm running my array concat method on the first 2 test arrays, and then I'm going to print the result. Some of you have forgotten that you can't just print an array directly like this. Your result 1 is an int array. If I print an array directly, it will print the memory location where the array is stored, which is not very informative. So arrays.toString converts that array into a string. Okay, and then here I'm running count clumps on test 3, and I'm going to print the result. So let's do array concat. So if I'm going to concatenate those 2 arrays, remember concatenate means sort of join them together ends to end. So I'm going to need to create a new int array, which I'll call ret for return. That's like my return array. And it's going to be a new int array, and its size is going to be a.length plus b.length, because it's got to be big enough to hold all of the values from a and b. So now I'll loop starting from 0, going to a.length, and I'm just going to copy everything over one at a time. So ret I equals ai. All right, so now I've copied all those over. Now I'm going to have another loop that's going to loop through the entire B array. Only this time, it's going to be ret a.length plus I equals bi. And the reason I have a.length plus I is because I want to start from the first empty location that wasn't filled by copying over all of the a values here. So notice here the very last value that I took on in this loop was a.length minus 1. Because it never, once I was equal to a.length, then it stopped looping. So we never actually looked at element a.length here. So now that must be the first available one for this loop, and that's why I have a.length, and then I starts at 0. So I'm sure that I'm starting from the first available one. If you wanted to do, if that all seemed like a little bit complicated, it's totally fine to have a pointer. So I could say next free equals 0. And you could have next free there, and then you could increment next free, like this. And then again, you loop through all of the B, but then again, you just assign to next free, and then you increment next free. That's actually probably, it's a little lengthier in code, it's a little less elegant, it's probably a little less fragile for you, because it's a lot less likely you'll experience a bug with this approach than with the other approach. Oh, don't forget to change the return value, so at the end I'll return the ret array. And let's go ahead and run it and make sure it does what it's supposed to do. So look, am I really concatenating test 1 and test 2? It looks like the answer is yes. What if I concatenate test 2 with itself? Okay, that also seems to work. Great. Okay, so now let's do count clumps. So a lot of you did weird things for this. Like you were trying to keep track of the length of different clumps, but that's not really relevant. You just need a simple test that will tell you whether or not a new clump is starting. And it seems like a great test is whether or not the value you're on is different than the previous value. If the answer is yes, you're starting a new clump. If the answer is no, like in this case, you are not starting a new clump, you are in the same clump. So I think I would probably start it this way. I'll have num clumps equals 1. The reason I'm setting it to 1 by default, well, you'll see why I'm setting it to 1 by default in a second. So now I'm going to start looping from the second element in the array, because I'm going to see if the element I'm on is the same as the previous element, and I don't want to accidentally look off the left side of the array. So then I is less than r dot length, I plus plus. So now I can just say if array element I does not equal the previous one, I know number of clumps. I know I must have an additional clump here. And then at the end, I can return num clumps. Okay, so this is a very succinct solution. The reason that I initialized num clumps to 1 is, think about this example where there's only one clump. So I'm going to loop through every element, but it's never going to happen that the one that I'm on is different than the previous one. So if you need a test like that to be true in order to even add one clump, you're going to have an error for those kinds of test cases. Because in this example, that if statement would never happen, so a solution that required that would never actually add a clump. So for mine, we're starting off with one clump. Well, actually, let me go back. So another example of one for which we need this is like, what happens if you only have an array with one element? Then you, by definition, have one clump. But again, there's nothing to compare it to. So my code's going to work because my code is going to loop through the array, but it's immediately going to exit because there is no array element 1. There's only array element 0. But it's still going to return the right thing because I initialized num clumps to 1. So I guess sort of the take-home message here is, like, think carefully about what are called edge cases. Edge cases are examples of, they're like test cases that are maybe different than the sort of average expected case. So you probably didn't consider as your first test case something with only one clump or something with only one element. But often if you think about your test cases, your edge cases in advance, that can help you. Okay, so let's test my things to see if they work. So I'm doing test 3, so we would expect this to output, here I'm going to control C that out. So we would expect this is only one clump, and when I run it, yep, one clump. Let's do test case 4. Yep, one clump. What about this? This looks like it should have 3 clumps, and it does. And test 1 says 6 clumps, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that looks like it's working okay. I think a lot of you do not test your code very carefully before you submit it. Please do so, because it's going to save us all a lot of pain. Okay, thank you very much. I hope this has helped.